Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping straight into a deeply unsettling case today, one that blurs the line between severe psychological trauma and terrifying supernatural events. We're going to unpack the harrowing story of a young man named Laksh, whose nostalgic trip back to his ancestral home in Kashmir dissolved into an absolute nightmare. This isn't just your standard ghost story, guys. It is a really chilling look at the long-term tragic consequences of our actions, and how a dark ritual brought past sins back to the surface.
So, let's dive right into the central question of this explainer. Can a childhood prank trigger deadly supernatural revenge years later? We generally think of childhood cruelty as something kids just outgrow or eventually forget about, right? But what happens when that trauma festers? What happens when a cruel act from your innocent years becomes the catalyst for something devastating decades down the line? That is exactly the terrifying reality we are exploring today.
To really grasp how completely out of place this horror was, you have to look at Laksh's day-to-day life. He was a 25-year-old guy fully settled into the fast-paced modern grind of Mumbai. He hadn't even been back to his ancestral home since he was about 10. But he finally decides to take a trip back to his roots, a quiet, snow-capped village in Kashmir where his grandparents still live. It was supposed to be this peaceful, joyful reunion with his family and nature.
Part 1. Return to the village.
For those first few days, the trip was actually perfect. Laksh is out exploring his old childhood spots, and he joyfully reunites with his close childhood friend, Kartik. But then, the idyllic vacation takes a massive, horrifying turn. One evening, after a walk with Kartik, Laksh is sitting around the dining table with his whole family. Out of nowhere, he starts choking. And we're not talking about a regular cough here. He feels something physically lodged deep in his throat. His family rushes over to pat his back, and Laksh violently vomits. But it isn't food. To everyone's absolute horror, he regurgitates a massive, thick clump of hair.
As you can imagine, the family's reaction was split right down the middle. His grandmother, who knows all the local village folklore, instantly suspects the evil eye, or a hex. Vomiting hair is a classic, really terrifying omen in a lot of occult traditions. His parents, on the other hand, are from the city, so they're desperately clinging to logic, suspecting some kind of bizarre food contamination. The problem is, medical logic completely fails to explain how a massive clump of human hair just forms inside someone's throat.
Part 2. Descent into madness.
That dinner incident? That was just the opening act. Over the next 48 hours, Laksh's erratic and violent behavior escalates at a terrifying pace. Early the next morning, Laksh's father wakes up to find his son just standing over him, staring blankly, not blanking at all. Laksha suddenly demands to know why his father ate an orange the night before, something Laksha couldn't have possibly known, and then just violently slaps his dad across the face before collapsing. Then late that night, it gets even worse. Laksha's older brother, Dharm, catches him standing right on the edge of the roof. When Dharm tries to pull him back to safety, Laksha violently bites a literal chunk of flesh out of his brother's shoulder and spits it out with this demonic smile.
Now here's where things shift from a scary psychological breakdown to something deeply, deeply sinister. Right before Laksha bit him, Dharm had spotted a mysterious figure in a black coat lurking down in the backyard. He watched as this shadowy figure intentionally sliced his own hand with a knife. The exact moment the blade cut the skin, a distinct bell rang out, ting ting, and in that precise second, up on the roof, Laksha collapsed. After that, the physical anomalies Laksha experienced became pure, visceral horror. He started crawling around on all fours like an animal, flashing that blood-chilling, vacant smile. His eyes were locked wide open and completely bloodshot. Most terrifying of all, his father noticed these strange white dots pushing up from beneath Laksh's skin all over his body, almost like hundreds of needles trying to break through. At one point, he completely stripped naked in front of his extended family, laughing hysterically while violently slapping and harming himself, all while tears streamed down his face. It was like he was trapped inside his own body. Part 3. The dark ritual discovered. Driven to the absolute brink, the family knew that shadowy figure in the backyard was their only lead. Dar managed to piece together where the guy might have run, leading a small group to a neighboring backyard where they kicked open the door to a hidden, incredibly foul-smelling room. The tension there must have been suffocating. Inside, they found a fully active occult ritual space. We're talking a freshly severed pig's head, animal skulls, human skull models, a bowl filled with fresh blood, red and black ritualistic threads, and, most damning of all, a clump of hair that perfectly matched what Laksha choked on.
As they are standing there, just frozen in horror looking at this room, a figure steps up behind them, holding a large saw. And guys, this is the ultimate shocking twist. It was Kartik, Lakshya's childhood friend, the guy who'd been sleeping in their house and touring him around the village. Dharma immediately spots two things. Kartik has a raw, fresh cut on his hand, and he's wearing a ring with a small occult bell that jingles, the exact sound Dharma heard from the roof.
Part 4. A Dark Childhood Secret. This twist entirely changes the narrative. It wasn't a random attack. It was deeply personal. When the family cornered him, Kartik didn't even try to deny it. Instead, he dropped this chilling confession built on years of immense pent-up trauma. He revealed that back when they were 10, Lakshya and his friends had severely bullied him. In one specific instance, they had completely stripped him naked and humiliated him in front of their entire class, including a girl he had a crush on. Kartik just coldly told them, "I've been waiting since we were 10. You ruined my life, now I will ruin his." He had literally learned the dark arts for the sole purpose of vengeance, just waiting years for Lakshya to finally come back to Kashmir.
What unfolds next is a chaotic and incredibly gruesome end to Kartik's story. While the family is panicking over how to cure Lakshya, Kartik suddenly breaks free. Completely driven mad by his obsessive need for revenge, he runs straight for the burning sacrificial fire. With this terrifying smile on his face, he violently and repeatedly bashes his own head into the stone and the flames. The family tried to stop him, but it was too late. Kartik succumbed to those self-inflicted wounds, dying right there in the ritual room.
Part 5. Exorcism and the Aftermath.
As Kartik was taking his final breaths next door, Lakshya's suffering back at the house reached its absolute peak. He was screaming in total agony as the supernatural tether violently reacted. But luckily, a local priest arrived with his disciples, completely tossing medical logic out the window. He takes one look at Lakshya's condition and knows exactly what they're up against. Radiating this immense calm and authority, he orders everyone back and immediately starts a direct spiritual intervention to break the curse that Kartik had tied to his own life force.
The priest dives into this intense emergency exorcism. First, he draws a protective boundary at the gate with sacred vermilion. Then, he throws charged vermilion directly onto Lakshya. And incredibly, wherever that powder hit him, those strange white dots pushing out of Lakshya's skin began to burn red bright. While chanting ancient, immobilizing mantras, the priest notices this massive, moving bulge on Lakshya's neck. In a truly terrifying climax, he slices the skin open with a needle and surgically extracts a second massive clump of wet hair directly from the wound. The second the hair was out, Lakshya immediately lost consciousness and the bleeding just stopped.
The morning after this crazy exorcism brought a really heavy, eerie peace to the house. Lakshya woke up in his bed, physically sore of course, but with complete amnesia regarding the horrors of the last 48 hours. He had zero memory of the possession, the violent things he did, the exorcism itself, or the tragic revelation and death of his friend Kartik.
But you know, while the supernatural entity was gone, Lakshya's psychological trauma was really just beginning. Once his family finally told him the truth, it took him over a year of severe mental recovery. He was grappling with this crushing guilt over his childhood bullying, wondering if his past actions somehow justified the horror he endured. He still suffers from lingering nightmares and terrifying visions today, and he only shared this story as a strict cautionary tale to others.
Ultimately, this explainer highlights a profoundly dark tragedy. Yes, the supernatural curse was successfully extracted from Lakshya, but the deep, invisible scars of a bullied 10-year-old child ended up claiming two lives in completely different ways. One was lost to madness and death, and the other is scarred by lifelong guilt and trauma.
Which leaves us with a chilling realization about human nature. As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to reflect on this. What invisible scars are we leaving on others through our everyday actions? And how might those wounds manifest, whether beautifully or terribly, years down the line? Thank you so much for joining me today. Until next time, stay curious and please be kind.